Howdy, guys. Life's pretty good. Everyone loves me again after I got out of that awkward 3D blast phase. Hold on a flip. What if I change my image? I think being likable's gotten pretty stale, so what if I... Nope, bad idea. Well, I did it before, so I can do it again. Why don't we look to our role model, Sonic the Hedgehog, for advice? No! This side represents my innocence, and this side represents my insecurities, eating me from the inside out.
Sonic's a cool guy, right? He's fast and blue and whatever else he does. After that extensive overview of his character, you would now automatically know that the 2000s were a time of experimentation. After some successful games, Sega would keep on trying and trying new ideas that 9 times out of 10 would fall flat on their face. Now, no need to interrupt me because I am very well aware that that's something that's said every time someone talks about Sonic, but something I'm sure no one said before is that I'm a dumb bitch. In the late 2000s, I didn't have a stupid Xbox 360 or PS3. That shit was for nerds. I had the Wii, where I mostly played various Mario and Lego games. But at one point, I dipped my small child-sized toes in the Sonic franchise. If you know me, you'd also know that I favored Sonic Colors, a pretty stellar game that had great music, fun if tedious gameplay, and nothing else. But there was another Sonic game on the Wii that I never beat. It was a somewhat confusing and incredibly boring experience for me. I mean, what's a 6-year-old supposed to find endearing about a hairy Stretch Armstrong punching shadow creatures in the middle of Europe? Look, the other game's got a rainbow robot whale. That's an automatic win to my heart. But after playing Sonic Colors last year, it really got me thinking, what was I missing? Obviously, after not playing it for over a decade, my tastes had to have changed.
Oh my god, guys, I got hacked!
I'd figured I'd give it another chance, considering how a lot of people have come out of the woodworks to praise the game recently. If there's one thing I hate, it's conformity, and I know that Sonic fans want me to like the game that GameSpot says is bad, but IGN says it's decent, but King Dippy said it was the second coming of Christ, so who can I really trust? But there is another thing that made me want to take another look at it. As it turns out, the Wii version I played is incredibly different to the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions that everyone else remembers. It was also released on the PlayStation 2, but I'm not a whore. I'm sticking true to my Wii roots, and with that comes a lot of pretty major changes.
Besides graphics, I don't really know what those changes would be because, like I said earlier, digital adultery will never be committed in this house. What are you looking at, whore?
The development of Sonic Unleashed technically started in 2005 with the creation of the Hedgehog engine, which is the engine used by the versions on the 360 and PS3. Yes, in usual fashion, the Wii and PS2 versions were actually co-developed between Sonic Team and Dimps. In our case, they're the guys that helped with Sonic Advance, Sonic Rush, helped port Sonic Colors to the DS, and ported Sonic Generations to the 3DS. Basically, this is kind of their thing. The game was originally going to be a third Sonic Adventure game, but since it changed so much, they decided to drop the idea. However, in Japan, the game would still be called Sonic World Adventure, referencing the globe-trotting theme. It also runs on a completely different engine, so I guess we can't have anything nice. Sonic Unleashed would release in North America on November 18th, 2008, which is the only date I'll mention because this shit's way too complicated.
Now, what qualities will 17-year-old me find that 7-year-old me was apparently too much of a fucking hotshot for? For that, we'll have to start where all great things start. My pants. Sorry, I was just too embarrassed to hide it anywhere else.
Starting up the game, we have this shockingly cinematic-looking cutscene. Like, besides the 480p compression, it's one of the best-looking cutscenes I've seen out of any of the Sonic games. The tone is pretty dramatic, considering Eggman's just doing his usual thing, powering up a giant laser, harnessing the power of the Chaos Emeralds through Super Sonic, which he then uses to shoot a giant beam into the Earth, practically shattering it, causing purple fog of some kind to begin spreading all over the Earth. Yeah, no, dramatic tone's justified. In the meantime, Sonic becomes what the game's Wikipedia page only describes as lycanthropy. Yes, I know that's some kind of scientific malicious term for werewolf, but to me it sounds more like a gum disease, so I'm not exactly pumped for this journey. Yes, this is the infamous werehog. It's a usual talking point people bring up when discussing how Sega threw absolutely everything at the wall back then, but that's not what I want to know. What does it add? Well, clearly aerodynamics is not one of those things because we're soon finding him being sucked out of Eggman's ship, crashing into some field, and right on top of this guy. He doesn't remember his name, probably because of the blunt force trauma we definitely inflicted on him. Daytime comes and Sonic turns back to normal, which finally lands us into gameplay. I'll get to the controls in a little bit, but for now, this game looks surprisingly good on the Wii. Graphical downgrades are a given, but they don't look as careless as many other Wii ports. It really feels like it was made for the Wii. So the first few levels are just basic tutorials that showcase the various mechanics. Like Sonic Colors, Unleash switches between 3D and 2D platforming stages. The 3D parts consist of mostly long corridors and various drifting segments. You have some returning mechanics like the homing attack, but this game would introduce many of the mechanics I talked about with Sonic Colors. Firstly, there's the boost meter, which I like a lot better here. In Colors, you were only able to fill it up with the Wisp capsules, but here it's just rings and the action chain combo system, which is way better to me. As for the drifting, it feels really solid to me and has to be one of the most satisfying mechanics in the whole game. I'm gonna throw a wacky analogy your way. Drifting is something I closely associate with going on an off-road adventure, which at least to me plays in really well with the whole exploration theme. Something here for simplicity's sake is the quick step mechanic. Basically, if you're running down one of these hallway sections you see throughout the game, you can use the shoulder buttons to quickly dodge to the left and right. It's a cool mechanic and all, it's just not used all too often, mostly being relegated to the bosses. In terms of new mechanics, they're all actually useful and fun, but don't hold your breath. The all-access gimmick fits just around the corner. Now we enter the main levels, where I can definitely notice some more differences. Sonic himself feels quite a bit slippery to me, but I am almost entirely sure that's just because I really suck at it. The world around Sonic, though, is really nice to look at. It's a nice change of pace from all the various metal environments that infested Sonic Colors. Not that I didn't like them, but this just feels more fresh to me. More on that later, though, as we come across the 2D segments. I'm sorry for bringing up Sonic Colors so much, but it's really the only thing I could go off for comparison's sake. Anyways, the 2D sections in Colors are a lot blockier, with tons of tedious platforming segments that, in my honest opinion, really slogged down the gameplay and made levels much more frustrating. Luckily for me, the 2D sections here are a lot more focused on speed and quick platforming, like sliding through gaps, wall jumping, bouncing off springs and enemies, as well as the mid-air trick system. They're still not my favorite, but it's much more streamlined now and helps out a ton with the flow of each stage. When you complete a level, you get a moon medal, which does something. Not quite sure yet, but we're still taking baby steps. After a few laughs and gaffs, we get another look into what's going on around here. So this town we crashed in is known as Apotos, a portside town located in Greece. After the blast, the Chaos Emeralds have lost their power, and the world's been broken into various pieces that don't just float off into space, because that would resemble a game I actually recognize. So now we need to not only figure out who this guy is and revert Sonic's bad hair day, but figure out how to pull large pieces of the Earth back together, which shouldn't be too difficult at all. In order to get to the next few stages, we'll have to look around the town and ask the various citizens about it. The phrase looking around is kind of a stretch because it's just a basic 2D menu, a far cry from the actual 3D hub worlds you'd find in the HD versions. It's fine if you just want the basic rundown of the plot and characters, but the 3D hubs are much better at actually immersing you in the game's world. At the very least, you can at least still talk to the residents, which reminds me of another major difference. It just feels so much more alive. I don't mean literally like the nature or the people walking around. I mean the dialogue and characterization is much more fleshed out. Look, I like Sonic Colors a lot as a game, but good lord, all the characters make me want to choke on an extra large order of clobbering because they are just so grating. Specifically Sonic, he was just a walking punching bag in more ways than one. I know the Craigmeisters changed it up a bit recently, but I'm just not a fan of this. Unleashed Sonic, however, feels a lot more real to me. Even when he's talking in a weird gravelly voice as the werehog, you can still tell he's a real person. He takes things much more seriously, but still keeps a lighthearted tone, something that doesn't go too far in the other direction. Same goes for the other characters he meets. They're cartoony, but still grounded in some way. We come across the town priest who directs us to the sacred Gaia shrine. The Gaia will become basically the main part of the story later on, but first let's talk about the Gaia shrines themselves. Now finally, they're actually fully 3D hub worlds where you can access the main story level. We use the Sun tablet, which opens up a door to the next few daytime stages. They're more of the same, still very smooth gameplay. We're awarded with a tablet fragment, I'll explain later. For now, the sun goes down, transforming Sonic back into the werehog. Whatever you call that purple stuff comes around and starts giving everyone a bad case of the sads.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, everyone starts participating in a little silly fad I like to call good old-fashioned family fun racial discrimination.
Oh, you goobers, that is Sonic. Apparently, Tails' is here, which means we have to save him from the danger that he can definitely get himself out of, but doesn't because that would be boring. So we go back to the temple with a moon tablet, letting us access the nighttime stages. As if the werehog itself wasn't already criticized for being dumb, the gameplay was absolutely eviscerated by critics. In short, the nighttime stages are basically a whole different game. These stages are essentially a mix between a beat-em-up and a 3D platformer. Like their daytime counterparts, the first few levels are just basic tutorials for the controls you'll have to get used to. So what can we do? We're given the ability to double jump, run on all fours, and the weirdest of them all, have stretchy arms. One very gimmickly challenged mechanic, Sonic can stretch his arms out to grab highlighted poles and ledges so he can climb, swing, and sidestep on the sides of mountains and buildings. Basically, while daytime Sonic has speed and agility, the werehog has strength and acrobatic skills. Now we're onto the actual levels. Every night stage contains a combination of the same basic sections. There's points where you need to do some tricky platforming with the grab mechanic. In Apotos, they're pretty simple and straightforward, but as the game goes on, they'll become much more difficult. But the most important part of these stages comes in the frequent combat sections. Basically, you'll enter a small area, then all of a sudden these walls come up and this very energetic jazz music starts blasting. A bunch of enemies start spawning. This time around, they're not robots or anything like that, but actually creatures made out of that weird purple Gaia stuff. Since obviously their existence is an absolute sin against nature, we have to exterminate all of them as quickly as possible. Sonic can perform various new attacks. He can swipe his claws, smash them on the ground like a hammer, and he can even pick up objects to chuck at enemies. When you kill an enemy, you collect Dark Gaia Force, which at the end of every stage, your total is tallied and you can get either upgraded stats or new abilities. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that just absolutely screams SpongeBob movie game to me. The problem with these sections is that they can go on for a very long time. It's not so bad in these first few stages, but their frequency later on will become very annoying. In addition to these sections where you collect these key thingies and various puzzles, that sounds like a whole lot for just one level, right? I passed the first level with an A rank, yet it took me nearly 7 minutes to complete. Remember earlier in the day when we got those moon medals? Well, in the nighttime stages, we get sun medals, which really makes me want to commit arson. Oh, by the way, they do nothing. In the HD versions, they're collected through the hub worlds and can upgrade Sonic's abilities. Considering all of that was removed, all they let you do now is play these little mini levels in the Gaia shrines. That's just another drawback I think the Wii version has. An upgrade system that stays throughout the entire game would have really helped to make these sections feel less isolated from the rest of the game. But no matter, we finally make our way to Tails and his very hypocritical predicament. After defeating the enemies in a much higher resolution universe, Tails brings us up to speed with the shit I just told you, like how the werehog is related to the weird purpley stuff going around, but that there's also a professor he knows that's been researching the Gaia. So we board the tornado, and finally we're making our first flight around the globe to Spagonia, which is a very funny name. It's just Italy, but with some very nice music. That's something I like about this game, the soundtrack. Each continent has its own distinct daytime and nighttime track. The daytime themes perfectly match the more energetic and exciting boost levels, while at night it takes on a much more relaxed, quieter tone to match the slower, stealthier progression of those stages. Talking to the residents and the professor's assistant reveals that he was kidnapped. And Chip can do this.
Oh my god!
Tails believes he was taken to Missouri, so we immediately leave Spagonia in under 3 minutes.
Did I miss a step? Or 10?
We arrive in Missouri, where we find a mysterious hole, or what can be more accurately described as a fun, metallic, Nickelodeon-themed prison. There, we finally meet Professor Pickle. He's a kooky science man who cares more about his sandwich than the fate of the world. Oh, you nut. Everyone you've ever known in love will die in a week. We fade to black, then fade back to Spagonia. The professor explains a bunch of prophecy that boils down to 3 main points. 1, there's an ancient creature known as Dark Gaia that's been awoken from the Earth's core. 2, Eggman's behind it because of course he is. And 3, our mission is to restore the Chaos Emeralds by visiting all 7 Gaia temples listed in the Gaia manuscripts. Now that we actually know what the we're doing, we go back to Missouri. There, Eggman's intimidating a bunch of villagers or something, and as we all know, actual racial discrimination is not allowed on Sonic's terms, so we gotta kick his ass. Missouri's unique from the other regions in that it has no levels, only a boss fight. They exist in the HD versions, but honestly, that's basically an entirely different game at this point, so let's just stop mentioning it. Our first boss fight is against the Egg Beetle, which is scarily similar to the final boss of Sonic Colors. Damn it, stop it with the comparisons! Dodge his attacks with with the quick step, obliterate him when the moment comes so that he disintegrates into nothing. Yeah, he's dead, no other way around that. We find the first Gaia temple, invent a new sexual euphemism, then we have the first continent restored, baby. Luckily, Tails seems to have a space nanny cam of the whole thing, so good for us. You know, Sonic, you could maybe be a little more helpful considering your friends are having a slightly hard time seeing you with all that gimmick hair on you. Finally, back to an actual level. Me, it's a night stage. I think now is a good time to mention the various items you can collect throughout these stages. And that's everything of worth there is to say about the items. These new flying enemies are going to be a real pain in the I'll tell you that. Again, though, I just have to highlight the stage design. These backdrops are beautiful, especially for a Wii game. I'm naturally just more of a fan of Italian and Parisian architecture, and I think it blends in surprisingly well with the more cartoony character design. Still not a huge fan of the incredibly long length of these levels, but the visuals make up for it. After getting the tablet fragment, we head over to Alaska, or Alaska. All we can take in from here is that this guy's a p***y, and that it's very cold. By now, the daytime levels feel more like a nice break from the tedious combat and platforming in the night stages, which makes it super unfortunate that they go by way quicker. Like, I get that's a given since these levels are focused much more on speed, but it became apparent how short it was after I realized that most of these levels are just small missions that last like 30 seconds. And I'm not just crazy. In the Wii and PS2 versions of this game, there are 3 times as many nighttime levels than there are daytime levels. It completely throws out the balance of the game, which is just frankly a huge missed opportunity. I mean, from the marketing to the plot to the damn box art, the game is split down the middle. By having nearly all night levels, which are arguably way worse than the day levels, it causes the pace of the game to feel very disjointed. There's not enough time to take in the atmosphere of the day for it to be effectively contrasted by the night stages. On the bright side, Alaska is a very beautiful level, which is benefited greatly by the energetic song that is Cool Edge. We grab the first fragment, head back to Spagonia, where we encounter this weird quick time segment. Some of these cutscenes can look pretty goddamn cheap. There's a time and a place, Pickle! At this point in the game, we get the structure. The professor tells us where the tablet fragments are, we head over there, talk to the natives, find the shrine, complete either way too short or frustratingly long and tedious stages, then we head back. It's pretty formulaic, but unlike Sonic Colors, where that has the basic progression of a Mario game, you never really know what's gonna happen next, which can either be really intriguing or annoying depending on who you are.
Yeah, sorry to say, losers, but I'm of the latter variety. So to distract from my rampant pessimism, let's go over the many regions that Sonic Unleashed has to offer.
There's the already mentioned Apodo, Spagonia, Mazuri, and Halaska, but there's still many more. We next head to Chunnan, obviously being an Asian region. The night levels take place in a forest surrounded by a lot of bamboo fencing and ancient Chinese architecture. I like the part that has this really cool waterfall background and you actually have to make your way up the side of it. Pretty stellar visuals. However, this area seemed to be one of the hardest for me to clear. I spent a lot of time just trying to swing over these pillars, but for whatever reason, Sonic just randomly lets go, even though I'm holding the R button as hard as possible, and it's making me mad. How was 7 minutes in S rank? Alright, I think we've gathered enough Gaia Force upgrades to take on our first Gaia boss, that guy from Paper Mario. Dodge the attacks, chuck some water at it, quite literally rinse and repeat. After we use the Chaos Emerald to restore another continent, we discover that the Gaia bosses are actually the guardians of their respective temples, or I guess only half of them. The Chaos Emeralds bring them back to their original form, so add another pretty basic chore to the list. We then cut to another cutscene where Eggman eats this disturbingly realistic sandwich while discussing his plan and fully revealing his utter incompetence. So get this. This is Eggman's master plan to take over the world. He lures Sonic and the Chaos Emeralds to his ship where he extracts their energy and powers his big laser thingy, shooting it into the Earth. When the planet splits and releases Dark Gaia, he was apparently going to harness its energy to help build his Eggman Land empire, eventually taking over the world. He went through with all of this without stopping and thinking about the fact that he knew nothing about this ancient godlike being whose only purpose is to destroy the planet he wanted to rule so badly. Plus, he quite literally threw away 2 of the only things that are notorious for ruining his plans. I understand there needs to be some kind of leeway so he can actually be stopped, stopped, but the mental gymnastics required to understand it is a little baffling. Ah, but whatever, that just means we can get back to more daytime boost stage shenanigans over in Spagonia. I've somewhat forgotten to mention the different tasks you're given in between stages, but that's almost entirely because these tasks just involve you going to another part of the town, something that's incredibly hampered by the 2D progression. But I think Spagonia's day stages overshadow that tenfold. First of all, the visuals are just as great as the other stages, but my favorite part has to be the music, being this perfect mix of adrenaline with some European accents. I can't say the same for Chun Nan's daytime stages. To me, they just kind of look like the Aquarium Park levels, but the water got drained. On a side note, those orange rings can go themselves. On a secondary side note, Eggman's in Spagonia with a laser fish robot that could, quite frankly, take over the world without summoning an unstable demon gas. You get the gist: dodge and clobber, emerald shoved in hole, planet puzzle 45% complete. We're now back in the tedious grind with the Halaskin Night levels, giving us a fresh mix of Aurora Borealis, robot fans, and giant ice labyrinths. My big problem with these particular levels is that the platforming sections are now combined with slippery ice. I'll tell you, I'm starting to kind of miss those combat sections. I take it back! The Gaia boss here is some big gobble-gut looking guy, and it's just as basic as the rest. Take out the shield, beat it up until he barfs up some ice tanks, then chuck it at him and absolutely Jason X that son of a bitch. Another temple! Hooray. Because of massive readings of Dark Gaia energy, aka Eggman Professor Pickle moves his lab to Shamar, an arid Arabian region. Here we come across a very self-aware NPC that makes me fear for the future of mankind, but oh boy, more day stages. The scarcity of these stages is very apparent in this particular mission.
Aren't you glad I didn't say tedious?
In all honesty, the level design here is some of my favorite, with the sprawling desert playing really well into the drifting mechanic and speed segments. I also like some of the architecture here too. Not all of it, but anything to note by now is pretty amazing. After about 10 minutes of this, we are then subjected to an hour and 3 minutes of nighttime stages in Adabat. There's not much to say that I haven't already said before, but the visuals are still great as ever. But by now, I've just grown numb to everything. Beat up enemies, do puzzles, freak the out because I can't get past these platforming segments, and you're done. Heading on over to Shamar, we have more of the same. You fight through dim alleys, up mountains, and fight fire wizards in some canyons. All very fitting for this globe-trotting adventure. We find another planet tablet letting us access the next boss, the Dark Guardian. The fight, at least visually speaking, reminds me a lot of the tiny fight from Crash 3. A very bold reference considering I've never played it, but honestly, warm-colored animals just scare the out of me. This one's as basic as they come. Just swipe at him when you have the chance. Pretty lackluster. With another continent restored, we head back to Adabat for the day stages. The visuals are great here. That tropical island aesthetic looks just as great when it's bright and colorful. The 2D sections especially give me Major Leaf Storm from Sonic Rush vibes. We get another planet tablet, but hold up. Look at this robot art. And man, I have to collect the cutscenes in order to watch them again? Bogus! But hey, no other game comes with free readable PDFs. What do you have to say now, atheists? The big bad boss here is another stupid robot, the Egg Lance. Credit where credit's due, this guy is pretty hard to beat. You gotta dodge lasers, fireballs, tiny fireballs, doing all of that on the side of a wall, and quick time events. It's a lot to keep up with. We destroy it like usual, but then we come across a suspicious temple. How suspicious? Quite. Chip has a kind of celestial reunion with the Light Man, which finally restores his memories. I kinda hoped he would remember bits and pieces of it Hangover style throughout the game, but thanks Sega, I guess I did need my self-esteem. But now we finally get the full story. Dark Gaia is awakened every few million years to destroy the planet. Chip's real name is Light Gaia, and his purpose is to destroy Dark Gaia and restore the planet, that being another part in this endless cycle. It's a pretty neat revelation to me because now Chip becomes much more serious, a great contrast to his clueless demeanor before. But I cannot be the only one who thinks it's really dumb Sonic didn't become sad because of the power of friendship. Well, I guess since he's the only one who can take Dark Gaia down, we might as well just kidnap Chip. Oh no, he has Stockholm Syndrome. We've reached the home stretch now. The professor discovers the location of Eggman's base, Eggman Land. Kinda hard to miss a giant carnival large enough to cover an entire continent, but I feel we've established that this is a man who shouldn't be trusted. We fly to World Bowser where no, Chip, no! So this is the final continent. There's no hub or anything, so we're plopped right onto the first day stage. It's once again more of the same, but with a few major changes. The aesthetics are a lot more mechanical and dystopian. You'll find yourself running through boiler rooms, dark alleys surrounded by factories, sewers, generic bad guy stuff. But where this level shines is in how frustratingly difficult it is. I guess shine's the wrong word, but still, this stage is an absolute slog. It's significantly longer than the other stages, which you'd think I'd be happy with, but they even take that too far. It took me about 5.5 minutes to clear, all of which is spent speeding down hallways, drifting, dodging spike balls, destroying robots, doing tricks off of walls and springs. The f***ing mini-boss is back and swinging over chasms. It's like a combination of every mechanic from the previous day stages all crammed into one package. I can tell it's supposed to test your skills, but none of the other stages were anywhere near this difficult. That's fine, it just would have felt less jarring if the difficulty slowly increased throughout the game. Anyways, we then go into the night stages, which are just as, if not longer, and even more tedious than the other stages. The enemy gauntlets appear almost constantly now, and they're obviously throwing all their firepower at you. Aerial attacks, this big guy that slams down on you, and just about enough small enemies to chew away at your health until you get 5 game overs. Yes, 5 of them, where you then proceed to do it over and over again. Fine, whatever. Last level done, last temple found, rock goes in hole, Tails probably died, but before I can not care about that, Eggman shows up with his obligatory last-ditch effort-o-matic. He's gathered all the Gaia energy and used it to power another shitty robot. You are just asking for an extra large clobberin'. This boss is just sad. It takes a while, but that's just because it takes a while. You dodge and swipe for about 5 minutes straight. It feels like a Sonic Adventure boss. Although I gotta admit, the surroundings are pretty badass. You fall down a giant hole in the first phase and you land in the center of the earth for the second phase, which just has to be the coolest area in the game. But the fight itself is just so lame that I'm pretty much forced to overlook that. After essentially giving Eggman a mercy kill, Dark Gaia finally emerges and oh my God, I'm sorry I ever doubted you. This is what I'm talking about, a shit-your-pants big bad demon man. Yeah, get the f*** out of here. Obviously, we can't take on that thing ourselves, so Chip summons the 7 Gaia temples right out of the ground and forms them into a Megazord thing. I'm just not gonna question that. This is it, the final boss. It's split up into 3 phases. The first phase is just Punch Out. Yeah, that took me by surprise. Down to the controls, it is literally Punch Out. So, let's skip over to the second phase. It's like a mini day stage, and you gotta run across the big Robo Temple while dodging Dark Gaia's attacks and poke it right in the eye. It's really difficult to dodge everything, and I die constantly, especially when my controller went on the fritz and didn't recognize inputs. Great. But after a few tries at that, Dark Gaia blasts the world with its sad gas, and the obligatory all hope seems lost but not really moment plays out, and oh my God, stop! Sonic regains power of the Chaos Emeralds and turns back into Super Sonic. The final phase is just absolutely confusing to me. You float around Dark Gaia, collecting enough rings to fill up this meter down here. You then have to position yourself in front of one of its eyes and press a button where you then zoom into it, dodging rocks along the way. The problem with this is that even when I got enough rings, it gives you absolutely no indication of where you're supposed to be going. Couple that with its constant swipes draining your health, I was not having the greatest time. By the way, I think I should mention that if you get a game over at any point in the boss, you're sent right back to the first phase, meaning I had to redo this boss many times. You're basically just reduced to moving absolutely everywhere, scouring for rings and whatever you're supposed to hit the eyes. By some miracle, I landed enough blows to finally take it down. Dark Gaia sinks into the Earth's core, evaporating its energy over the world, wrapping a very sketchy bow around our journey. Sonic wins, Eggman loses, and very justifiably insulted by his robots, and the world is at peace once more. Professor Pickle gives a heartwarming speech about the night and the necessity of darkness in our world, which he definitely stole from a book or something. Chip uses the last of his power to bring Sonic back to the surface, and fittingly right back to where we first almost killed someone. He disappears and leaves behind a bracelet, so we can always be with Sonic. Yeah, must have been a really present because we never see it again. I guess Tails isn't dead anymore, and we end things off with an admittedly pretty sweet cutscene of Sonic doing what he does best, running across the field into the sunset. So I guess I have to ask, what did I miss? For me, it's a mixed bag. Some aspects, like the whole traveling across the world concept and many of the level designs and aesthetics, are really great. Presentation is absolutely at its best here. But in between and surrounding that is a pretty jerky and convoluted experience, with some levels that are pretty good being being way too short and the other 75% being really boring and tediously frustrating marathons that I just don't like. It was a nice idea that I'm glad they tried, but it clearly wasn't working, and luckily later Sonic games went really back to basics. However, the story and characters are really well done compared to other Sonic games I've played. Sonic just seems like a genuinely nice person with a bit of an attitude. His relationship with Chip was really nice to see progress throughout the game, especially when he gets his memories back. Even in the heavily castrated Wii version, the game at least attempts to immerse you in its world, and while it doesn't really work for me, the thought is at least somewhat commendable. Overall, I can tell why I never bothered beating it back then. Sonic Colors is just a much flashier and visually appealing game with much simpler controls and mechanics. Pitting them next to each other, I'd say Sonic Unleashed is much more ambitious, but results in it faltering in some areas. I'm sorry, King Dippy, I'm just not the biggest fan. Although I will always enjoy the effort that went into creating this world and its characters.
Well, I learned a valuable lesson today. Always trust children. They always seem to know what's up. But I also learned that I shouldn't have to apply a label or a gimmick to myself that changes my entire personality. I'm a very deep and complex individual, and that's something that should be celebrated. So come sit with me as I play Wii Sports for the 7th time today. I'm a whore.